If teachers feel that the school is going in the wrong direction or that something's not going to get them to the goal, first of all, the goals have to be really clear. What are the shared goals that we have as a learning community at this school? And trying to get everybody on board, and then what are the best actions to get to those goals? And if teachers feel like they're not there isn't leadership for that, it starts with dialogue with their principal, and open dialogue, and not defensive and not attacking people, but really dealing with what are the issues and how can we strengthen that. So if the issues are that parents don't understand what we're doing and they're coming at us because they're angry all the time, then how do we open up and really help parents understand what we're trying to do and make them partners rather than adversaries? And it's that whole attitude of recognizing parents want the best for their kids, and we want to deliver the best, and how can we do that? Every parent isn't reasonable. And you know, and that's part of the job. Just like every shopper isn't reasonable at Macy's.
Exactly.
That's the world that we live in.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. But I would also say, in talking with some of the parents, it's interesting when you hear some of the experiences that some parents have had where it's like running into a brick wall, or that kind of thing. So I know that they're looking for where is it that I can go to talk about this situation. And ultimately, and I'll tell you one thing that I learned in some of my research, and the weighted student formula, and that's a part of Act 51. Well, Mike Strumbitsky, the person who invented the weighted student formula, what he said, because he didn't have like district superintendents, but it was about the same size as our state, and they're in his area. And each time that a principal would have some kind of concern or a problem that happened at that school, he would basically, turn his hand around and just basically say, okay, yes, I am above you. Yes, I am the superintendent, but turn them back to their school and says, you need to figure this out at the school level. And so there wasn't really an option, and I'm sure it doesn't happen with every single issue. There's some issues that the superintendent must, handle. But I found that to be very empowering, I guess, for the principal, knowing that you were going to make sure that it took place somewhere, that there was accountability, that someone was going to take the, make the decisions and then, deal with those decisions. And I think for some of our parents, and what I'm hearing is like, there's always push to somewhere else. Go talk to this person, go talk to this person, go up the ladder, come down the ladder, that kind of thing. Right. And so it gets very confusing.
They get lost
for
in
them.
the system.
Yeah, they get lost in the system. So I know that those are some of the things that, we're probably going to have to figure out, like, how do we get around the system that we have and understand how, who needs to make these decisions. But that was just a thing that I had remembered when talking to parents recently.
Well, what's really fair is we discipline kids a lot as parents and as educators. There's times when we have to discipline, and discipline is really about teaching. And it doesn't start when they've done the action that's going to require discipline. It starts before that, is informing them, teaching them, giving them the right model. If you're using the core ethical values, you talk about kindness and compassion, you talk about empathy, you create a culture where there's acceptance and respect prior to that. Then when they break the rule or do something they're not supposed to, they know this is a consequence. It's not a punitive consequence, but it is a consequence, and they have to make it right. So it's creating that culture. Well, if you take that concept and you take it all the way up, as a principal, it's my responsibility to really make my teachers aware of these are the boundaries you can't cross. Okay, I do it with a lot of accountability, or I did it. the very first day of school, I've got new teachers, I've got old teachers, and there's certain things that everybody needs to hear. I have them sign off on it after we go over it, and we keep that. And certain things you cannot do as an adult in the public school system. And so these are the boundaries, these are the things that you don't have free speech to talk about. These are the things that the boundaries you can't cross. So I set that, and then when something happens where someone goes over the line, it's very much like this action is going to have a consequence, okay? But it's in a framework of this learning community environment. And so I think by proactively addressing things before they happen, it takes more than knowledge, so it takes wisdom. And so if you're not having principals have conversations about that and sharing strategies of how do you support this as you start a new school year, or how do you remind people of it? Yeah.
Let me, we have just a bit of time left, and wanting to, I heard you talk about one of the things that, and I visited Moanalua Middle and read with middle school students and found it to just be a rewarding activity for me. But I want you to talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was a magnificent I don't know about turnaround, but improvement that took place in Moanalua Middle School. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Right about the time that we were struggling with getting the scores to gain for accountability for No Child Left Behind in our own state's benchmarks, we recognized as a staff that, okay, half of our kids were not reading at grade level. And yet, when you take secondary kids, it's not about sounding out the word, it's about comprehension. And so it's teaching reading comprehension. And we could point our finger at the elementary schools and say, it's your fault, you're not teaching them to read. But ultimately, these are our kids, and we've got them right now. And we either take responsibility for them, or we send them off to high school not reading. And the advocates from the state and the nation were telling us to target the tipping point, the kids that are closest to the benchmark. And yet there's something morally wrong about not dealing with these kids that are well below. So as a staff, we made a commitment that these are our kids, we're going to own them, and we're all going to teach reading. And starting with just 5 or 6 basic comprehension strategies, and teachers had to teach other teachers how to do this in science. How do you use visualization? How do you use annotation? How do you use context clues in a content area? And spending lots of staff time, meeting time, to revisit it, to learn, try it out, come back, talk about it. And at that time, and then purposefully teaching kids to understand their own thinking and what low-level thinking is and high-level. When you compare and contrast, I'm doing higher-level thinking than just explaining. And so by doing those two things, and getting the resources of the community involved and the community partners who came in and read with kids, and having great teacher leadership, we made gains of over 35% in a couple years.
Wow.
And so it does work, but it's all about what's the research say, and how do we learn what we need to learn, and how do we go back to our class and actually do it.
And I would say that is leadership and collaboration, and what you were able to do there. And one of the things, and the reason why I really wanted you to be a part of this show, Caroline, I keep on calling you Caroline.
That's okay.
Caroline, is because we know that there are very good teachers out there, and we know that there are hardworking and very good principals out there, and that are giving good education to our kids. And we need to talk definitely more about those types of situations, as well as talk at how we can improve the system systemically, so that we can allow for these newer, maybe not as experienced, or maybe learning new things for principals and teachers, and getting them to the point where they can be outstanding principals and teachers as well.